You ever have one of those moments where you're sitting alone, staring at a blank wall, and it hits you how far you've gone for something you never thought you'd do? That's me right now, typing this out, my fingers shaking a little. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not sorry either. My revenge was quiet, but it was deadly. She didn't feel the strike until it was way too late. Her name was Emily Harper, and I spent years crafting the perfect way to make her pay for what she did to me. This isn't some dramatic movie plot. This is my life, and I'm spilling it here because, well, I don't know. Maybe I need someone to hear it. Maybe I just need to get it out before it eats me alive. It started 5 years ago, back when I was a different guy, Jacob, optimistic, trusting, maybe a little naive. I was 28, working as a graphic designer in a small firm in Portland, living in a cramped apartment with too many plants and not enough sunlight. Emily walked into my life like she owned it. She was my coworker, all sharp wit and brighter smiles, with this laugh that could make you feel like you were the only person in the room. We hit it off fast, late-night chats over takeout, brainstorming sessions that turned into excuses to hang out. I thought I'd found someone real, someone who got me. But I was wrong. Emily had this way of making you feel special, like you were her confidant, her partner in crime. She'd lean in close, her hazel eyes locked on yours, and tell you things that made you feel like you were part of her inner world. I fell for it, hard. Not romantically, at least not at first, but as a friend, someone who thought we had each other's backs. We'd spend hours talking about our dreams, our fears. I told her about my mom's cancer scare, how it tore me up to see her so fragile. Emily listened, nodded, squeezed my hand. I thought it meant something. Then came the project. Our firm landed a big client, a tech startup with deep pockets, and Emily and I were tasked with leading the design. It was our shot to shine, to maybe get noticed and climb out of the gruntwork trenches. We poured everything into it, late nights, endless revisions, my sketches paired with her pitch-perfect presentations. I trusted her to handle the client meetings while I focused on the art. Big mistake. When the project wrapped, Emily took full credit. Not a mention of me. Not a whisper. The client loved her work, and she got a promotion while I was left stapling mock-ups in the back room. I confronted her, calm at first, thinking it was a misunderstanding. She just smiled, that same warm smile, and said, "Jacob, you know how this industry works. You've gotta seize opportunities." I was floored. It wasn't just the credit. She'd lied to our boss, said I'd barely contributed, that I was more of an assistant. My work, my late nights, my ideas, all erased. I felt like I'd been gut-punched. That's when the seed of revenge planted itself. I didn't know what I'd do, but I knew it wouldn't be loud or fast. It'd be slow, deliberate, and she wouldn't see it coming. Why didn't I just quit? Move on. I tried. I applied to other jobs, but the industry's small, and Emily's name was suddenly everywhere. Her star was rising, and mine was stuck. Every rejection stung, "We went with someone with more experience" email felt like her shadow looming over me. I started watching her, not in a creepy way, just observing. Noticing how she operated, how she charmed people, how she built her little empire on half-truths and stolen credit. I wasn't ready to act yet, but I was learning. And the more I learned, the darker my thoughts got. What do you do when someone takes your work, your reputation, and leaves you with nothing? Do you let it go? Or do you start planning? I chose the latter, and it changed me. I'm not sure if I like who I became, but I know I don't regret it. Not yet. I'm not a vengeful guy by nature. At least, I didn't think I was. Growing up, I was the kid who'd rather talk things out than throw a punch. But Emily's betrayal did something to me. It was like a splinter under my skin, festering every time I saw her name on an email or heard her laugh in the office. I stayed at the firm partly because I needed the job, partly because I wanted to keep an eye on her. I started paying attention to everything, her habits, her weaknesses, the way she played people like pieces on a chessboard. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about yelling or confronting her again. It was about finding the perfect moment, the perfect way to unravel her world without her even suspecting me. Emily was good at her game. She'd flatter the boss, Mark, with just the right mix of charm and competence. She'd mentor new hires, only to take credit for their ideas too. I saw it happen to a guy named Tim, fresh out of college, who came up with a killer logo concept. Emily praised him in private, then pitched it as hers in a meeting. Tim didn't even realize he'd been robbed until I pointed it out. He just shrugged, said, "That's how it goes." But I wasn't Tim. I wasn't going to shrug. I started keeping a notebook. Not digital, too easy to trace, but an actual spiral-bound thing I kept in my bag. I wrote down everything: the clients she worked with, the lies she told, the people she manipulated. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it yet, but it felt like gathering ammunition. I'd sit in the break room, pretending to sketch, while listening to her schmooze with colleagues. She'd talk about her vision for projects, using words I'd said months earlier. It was maddening, but it also made me sharper. I was learning her playbook. Outside of work, I was a mess. I stopped hanging out with friends, stopped watering my plants. They all died, by the way, a sad little metaphor for my life back then. I'd go home, crack open a beer, and just think. What could I do to her that would hurt like she hurt me? I didn't want to break the law, not out of some moral high ground, but because I wasn't stupid. Whatever I did had to be clean, subtle, something that couldn't be traced back. I started reading about psychology, about how people build their identities, their careers. Emily's power came from her reputation, her image as the golden girl who could do no wrong. That was her weakness, too. One day, I overheard her talking to a client on the phone, promising a design she hadn't even started. She was confident, almost cocky, because she knew someone like me or Tim would pick up the slack. That's when it clicked: her whole career was built on other people's work. If I could expose that without exposing myself, I could ruin her. But how? I needed evidence, and I needed a way to make it public without anyone pointing a finger at me. I wasn't ready to act, but the idea was taking shape, like a sketch slowly coming into focus. I started small. I'd leave anonymous notes for Mark, nothing obvious, just vague hints about checking project logs to see who was really contributing. He ignored them. Of course, he was half in love with Emily's charm. But I kept at it, planting seeds. I'd tweak files just enough to make her look careless, changing a font size here, a color code there, so her presentations had tiny flaws. She'd catch them, usually, but it made her sweat. I could see it in her eyes, that flicker of doubt. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. The real question was, how far was I willing to go? I didn't know yet. But every time I saw her smile, heard her take credit for someone else's work, that splinter dug deeper. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was obsessed. By year 2, I was a shadow of myself. Not physically, I still looked like Jacob, maybe a little thinner, a little more tired around the eyes, but inside, I was different. I wasn't the guy who trusted easily anymore. I was the guy with a notebook full of Emily's lies, a guy who spent his nights thinking about how to bring her down. It wasn't healthy, I know, but it was all I had. Work was a grind, my social life was non-existent, and every day felt like a countdown to something I couldn't yet name. I started taking bigger risks. Emily was working on a huge campaign for a local brewery, one that could put our firm on the map. She was leading the pitch, but I was still doing most of the design work: mock-ups, logos, the whole visual package. She'd take my drafts, tweak them just enough to call them hers, and present them to the client. I decided this was my chance to test the waters, to see how far I could push without getting caught. I created 2 versions of the brewery designs. One was the real deal, clean, professional, exactly what the client wanted. The other was a trap, same aesthetic, but with subtle errors. Wrong font weights, off-brand colors, a typo in the tagline. I saved the good version on my personal drive and slipped the flawed one into the shared folder Emily used. I knew she wouldn't check it closely. She trusted me to handle the grunt work, as she called it. When she presented it to the client, I was in the room, pretending to take notes. The client noticed the typo first, then the colors. Emily's face went red, and she stammered through an apology, blaming technical issues. I kept my head down, but inside, I was buzzing. Mark pulled her aside after the meeting, and I heard him say, "This isn't like you, Em." She brushed it off, but I could tell it shook her. For the first time, her perfect image had a crack. I fixed the designs that night, sent her the good version, and she salvaged the pitch. But the damage was done. The client started asking more questions, double-checking her work. She didn't suspect me not yet, but I saw her glance my way a few times, like she was trying to figure out if I'd messed up on purpose. That's when I realized how careful I had to be. Emily wasn't stupid. She was a manipulator, sure, but she was sharp. If I pushed too hard, too fast, she'd start connecting dots. I backed off for a bit, went back to being the quiet, reliable Jacob she expected. But I kept adding to my notebook. I started digging into her past, not stalker stuff, just public records, old social media posts, anything I could find. I learned she'd bounced around a few firms before ours, always leaving with glowing reviews. But there were gaps, projects she'd worked on that mysteriously fell apart after she left. It made me wonder how many other Jacobs she'd screwed over. I also started building alliances. Not friends, exactly, but people at work who'd been burned by Emily. Tim, the logo guy, was one. There was also Sarah, a copywriter who'd had her taglines borrowed by Emily. We'd talk in whispers, over coffee runs, about how she operated. They didn't know about my plan, nobody did, but their stories fueled me. I wasn't alone in my anger, and that made me bolder. The brewery incident taught me something else. Revenge felt good, but it was addictive. I wanted more. I wanted her to feel what I felt: helpless, humiliated, erased. But I had to be patient. My next move had to be bigger, something that would hit her where it hurt most, her reputation. I just didn't know what it was yet. Or how much it would cost me. I think the moment I truly committed to this, when I stopped just fantasizing about revenge and started living it, was about 3 years in. I'd been chipping away at Emily's armor, little by little, with those small sabotages. A misplaced file here, a forgotten email there. Nothing big enough to point to me, but enough to make her look sloppy. She was still the star of the firm, but I could see the strain. Her smiles were tighter, her jokes less frequent. She was starting to feel the pressure, and I was just getting started. Then came the annual industry conference. It was a big deal. Hundreds of designers, clients, and bigwigs from across the country, all gathered in Seattle for 3 days of panels and networking. Emily was set to present our firm's latest campaign, a rebrand for a national coffee chain. It was her chance to shine on a bigger stage, maybe even land a better job somewhere else. I saw my opportunity. I volunteered to help with her presentation. She was surprised but didn't question it. She was used to me doing the heavy lifting. I spent weeks perfecting the slides, making sure every visual was flawless. But I also created a second version, one I kept hidden. This one had a single slide buried deep in the deck, one that would only appear if she clicked through too fast. It was a mock-up of the coffee chain's logo, but with a twist. I'd altered it to look like a rip-off of a competitor's design. Not blatant, but close enough that anyone in the industry would notice. The day of the presentation, I was a wreck. My hands were sweaty, my heart pounding like I was about to rob a bank. Emily took the stage, all confidence, clicking through her slides like a pro. I sat in the back, watching, waiting. She was almost at the end, and I thought maybe she'd skip the trap slide. But then she clicked one too many times, and there it was, the fake logo, glowing on the screen. The room went quiet. Someone coughed. A guy from the coffee chain whispered to his colleague, frowning. Emily froze, just for a second, then laughed it off. "Oops, wrong slide," she said, clicking back. But the damage was done. People were murmuring, checking their phones, probably Googling the competitor's logo. After the panel, I saw her cornered by the client, her face pale as she tried to explain. I slipped out before she could spot me. That night, at the conference mixer, I heard people talking about it. "Did you see that logo? Total knockoff." "Yeah, I thought Emily Harper was better than that." It was exactly what I'd wanted, her reputation, her precious image, starting to crack. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. I wanted her to feel the way I did when she stole my work, small, invisible, like nothing you did mattered. When we got back to Portland, Mark called her into his office. I didn't hear the conversation, but she came out looking shaken. For the first time, she didn't stop to chat with anyone. She just grabbed her bag and left. I should have felt triumphant, but instead, I felt empty. Like I'd climbed a mountain only to realize there was another one waiting. What was I doing? Was this really worth it? I pushed the thoughts away. I was too deep in to stop now. After the conference, things changed. Emily was still the golden girl, but there were whispers now, doubts. Clients started asking for second opinions on her work. Mark was watching her more closely. I could have stopped there, let the cracks widen on their own, but I didn't. I was in too deep, and the truth is, I was starting to enjoy it. Not just the revenge, but the power. For once, I wasn't the one being stepped on. I was the one pulling the strings. I started digging deeper into Emily's life. Not just her work, but her personal world. I found her old blog, one she hadn't updated in years, full of posts about her creative process that sounded suspiciously like other people's ideas. I cross-referenced dates and found a pattern. Every firm she'd worked at had a trail of disgruntled coworkers, people who'd felt used but never spoke up. She was a vampire, feeding off other people's talent, and I was done letting her get away with it. My next move was riskier. I knew Emily was pitching for a massive account, a chain of boutique hotels looking for a full rebrand. This was her ticket to the big leagues, maybe even her own firm someday. I couldn't let that happen. I started by leaking a tiny bit of her pitch to a competitor. Not the whole thing, just enough to make them prepare a similar concept. I used an anonymous email, routed through a VPN I'd set up for exactly this purpose. When the hotel chain saw two nearly identical pitches, they questioned Emily's originality. She didn't lose the account, not yet, but they delayed the decision, and she was rattled. I didn't stop there. I hacked together a fake portfolio, one that looked like it came from a freelancer, and sent it to the hotel chain's marketing director. It included designs that were suspiciously close to Emily's, dated a few weeks earlier. I made sure the freelancer's bio was vague, untraceable. The director emailed Emily, asking about plagiarism concerns. She called me that night, frantic, asking if I'd seen anything weird in the shared drives. I played dumb, said I'd look into it. Inside, I was grinning. But here's the thing, the more I did, the more I realized how much I was risking. If anyone traced that email, those designs, back to me, I'd be done. Not just fired, maybe sued, maybe worse. I started double-checking everything, covering my tracks. I stopped using my work computer for anything related to the plan. I bought a cheap laptop, cash, from a pawn shop, and used it only for my research. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone who thought like a criminal. It scared me, but it also thrilled me. Emily was unraveling. She started snapping at people in the office, making mistakes she'd never made before. One day, she yelled at Sarah over a typo in a draft, and Sarah quit the next week. Tim started looking for other jobs. The team was falling apart, and Emily was too busy trying to save her own skin to notice. I should have felt victorious, but instead, I felt this gnawing sense that I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. What was the endgame here? Did I want her fired? Humiliated? Worse? I didn't know anymore. By year 4, I was living 2 lives. There was Jacob, the quiet designer who showed up to work, kept his head down, and did his job. And then there was the other Jacob, the one who spent nights plotting, scheming, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Emily was still standing, but she was wobbling. The hotel chain had gone with another firm, citing concerns about originality. Her reputation was taking hits, and I could see it in her eyes. She was scared. For the first time, she wasn't in control, and I was the reason. I decided it was time for the final blow. I'd been collecting evidence for years now, emails, project logs, even recordings of her taking credit for other people's work. I'd used a cheap voice recorder, hidden in my bag, to catch her in meetings. It wasn't much, just snippets, but it was enough to show a pattern. I compiled it all into a single document, anonymized, and sent it to Mark and the firm's board. I didn't sign it, didn't leave any trace. The email was simple: you might want to look into who's really doing the work around here. I waited. Days passed, then a week. Nothing happened. I started to think they'd ignored it, that Emily's charm had won out again. But then I got called into Mark's office. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days. He asked me about the brewery project, the conference, the hotel pitch. Not accusing, just probing. I played innocent, said I didn't know what he meant. He sighed, said, "Things are messy right now, Jacob. Just keep doing good work." That afternoon, Emily was called in. She didn't come out for 2 hours. When she did, she looked like a ghost. She didn't speak to anyone, just packed her things and left. The next day, Mark announced she'd decided to pursue other opportunities. I heard later she'd been let go, quietly, to avoid a scandal. The firm didn't want to admit they'd been duped by her for so long. I thought I'd feel something: triumph, relief, something. But all I felt was hollow. I'd won, hadn't I? Emily was gone, her career in tatters. I'd done what I set out to do. So why did it feel like I'd lost something too? I started wondering if I'd gone too far, if I'd become someone worse than her. My notebook was still in my bag, full of secrets I'd never share. I couldn't bring myself to burn it, though. Not yet. It's been 6 months since Emily left. The firm's different now, quieter, less vibrant, but also less toxic. I got a promotion, took over some of her projects. People started noticing my work, finally. But it doesn't feel like I thought it would. Every compliment, every pat on the back, makes me think of what I did to get here. I keep expecting someone to figure it out, to point at me and say, "It was you." But nobody does. I covered my tracks too well. I heard Emily moved to Chicago, took a low-level job at some startup. She's trying to rebuild, but the industry talks. Her name's tainted now, and I know I'm the reason. I tell myself she deserved it, that she built her castle on lies and it was bound to fall. But late at night, when I'm alone with my thoughts, I wonder if I went too far. My revenge was quiet, but it was deadly. She didn't feel the strike until it was too late. I waited for the perfect moment, when she was completely unprepared, and I struck. And now I'm the one left carrying the weight of it. I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe I need someone to know, even if it's just strangers on the internet. Maybe I need to confess, to make sense of what I've done. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I don't think I deserve it. I just want you to understand why I did it. Emily took something from me, something I can't get back. But in taking her down, I think I lost something too. Maybe that's the real price of revenge. It doesn't just destroy your enemy. It changes you, and not always for the better. I keep that notebook on my shelf, a reminder of who I was, who I became. Sometimes I open it, read through the pages, and feel that old anger flare up. Other times, I just feel tired. I don't know what's next for me. Maybe I'll leave this job, start over somewhere new. Maybe I'll try to be the guy I was before all this. But deep down, I know one thing: if I had to do it again, I'd probably make the same choices. And that scares me more than anything.